Rolling.
Sync for sync.
Welcome to Cut 2, the podcast. We have a guest episode for you. This absolute gentleman has travelled around the world, and not only that, on a bike. And not only that, on a single-speed bike. He is the founder of Bikepacking Scotland, and he creates and designs bikepacking routes that you can go and explore right now. It is the one, the only, Markus Stitz. Welcome to Cut 2.
Schönen guten Abend.
I forgot a huge part of what you do, which is filmmaking. Well, Markus, I've done a little intro to you. How would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? I'm definitely a person who loves to go outside. I think that's the range to all of that. And I love to be creative, and I love working with people. And I guess the other thing is also to get the good out of people, like to inspire them to do something nice, something fun, something that makes other people happy, something that like has a meaningful impact on their life.
You produce some really amazing content. I've been following your content ever since we met, which is many moons ago. What's your tipple of choice?
It's an Argentinian Malbec. So I'm not in Scotland at the moment, I'm in Norway, and alcohol is a little bit more dear here.
What was the price of the bottle?
That is a cheap one, 12 quid.
And that's a cheap one?
That's the entry level here, yes.
Fair play. Well, I'm just drinking my usual Mountains on the Wine, which is unusual.
Yeah, very unusual. I forgot to get beer. I ran out of time to get beer, so I've raided the fridge and I've found some McGuigan Single Batch Project Pinot Grigio. So, cheers, guys. Pleasure to have you on, Markus.
Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Since coming back from a round the world trip, I've been on adventures in very different parts of Scotland, with sea lochs, islands, hills and glens, just waiting to be explored.
You run Bikepacking Scotland. You founded that.
Yeah.
You design bikepacking routes that people can follow, and you partner up with brands, local authorities, and companies to help promote local areas in terms of tourism, so people can get out there, enjoy things in a very responsible way, given that you're on a bike.
Yeah.
So how did it all begin? You know, where was the love of cycling? Where did that begin?
So the love of cycling is an interesting one, because I was a super late starter to anything which is exercise. In fact, I would not use the word hate, but I disliked exercise as a kid, because I wasn't your sporty child. Like, I was always a bit clumsy, I think. and I'm also quite, and this is interesting because I think like as a child I was really introvert, so I was more like, I was quite comfortable sitting in the corner and doing stuff with my Lego bricks or constructing stuff. And then I learned to cycle, I think at the age of 7. And and then like I also have quite an addictive personality, I think. So if I start doing something, so as a child, those are all things people just necessarily don't know about me. But I collected stamps. Like I've got like 8 albums of stamps at home still. And then
old school.
So I think once I've started cycling, I was just also trying to do more of it. But it really just started at university. When I was gaining a little bit of weight and I started doing a little bit more exercise. I also had like a period of quite severe illnesses. I did my community service instead of military service in Germany, and I was working with children, and I've just picked up all the illnesses you can pick up in a year. It was quite interesting.
Tell me a little bit about that, Markus. Was it a choice? You could choose to do either military service or community service, and that's a requirement.
It no longer is, although who knows, with the current situation at the moment it might come back. But back then, yeah, you either had to do a community service or military service. So you had to write a letter saying those are my reasons for not doing 1 year of military service. There was either 1 or 3 years you could do military service, and I chose to do community service. And I was working in I was working in the Catholic school with disabled children, and that's kind of like a little bit where I started discovering film as a medium for me as well. That was back in the days, oh my gosh, where everything was taped still. Like there was nothing digital back in the days.
Remember it well.
I don't.
Yeah, and then after that year of community service, I went to university. So I had like one of those, like, you know, the first year where you settle in and you do all the stuff. And then in the second year, I was in a beautiful town, like right on the edge of a forest. And so I had this whole playground in front of my door, and we lived on the edge of town as well. And then basically I just picked up a bike and started mountain biking, and I think ever since then I haven't really turned it down at all.
Thinking about you bikepacking, you do it a lot solo as well, and you went literally around the world. So you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were packing your bike up and shipping it when you know, because you can't cycle across an ocean. Well, maybe you could. I mean, sort that out, would you, Markus? I'm a little disappointed if you didn't cycle across the ocean, but well, some people might think, my gosh, what a lonely pastime or activity to do. What's it like when you're out there riding solo in the middle of nowhere?
I think there's a distinction. So I think there's two words. Like, I think there's being on your own and being lonely, and I think they're very distinct things. I think you can be lonely in other people's company. I would not sugarcoat a trip like this. There are times where you try to throw in a towel and say, this is it. I had enough of this. Like it's a roller coaster. Like in many ways, actually, it's a mental roller coaster. I also chose to ride quite a hilly route because I was on a single speed. So there's another misconception that people have with single speed bikes, is that you would naturally choose the flattest route you can find, which you won't. I think if you talk to a lot of people out there who ride single speed bikes, they'll yearn for any hill they can find, because it means that you can get downhill on the other side as well. If you're on the flat straight road, you just have to have the right, it's just, I find it boring. I would describe the trip as, I think it's been the best mindset building exercise I could have ever done. Especially the way I did it, I kind of threw myself in on the deep end because I didn't have much time to plan the trip. And that's the kind of things, like with many things in life, you can overplan things, you can plan things to death and then don't do it, and kind of like it's very easy to find excuses for not doing things. That's much easier than actually doing things. And so I didn't have much time to plan the trip, and I thought, like, it's, you know, from the outset, it can't be that difficult. You know, all you really need to do is to ride your bike for a certain distance a day, find some food, find a place to pitch your tent, and find some transport in between. Like, that really is it. Like, there's nothing complicated about it. And that's what I did for a year. And of course, you know, there's situations where, I love the deserts, but they can be quite interesting places as well. I wouldn't call them lonely places, because that's, again, this is this distinction of being, I think I'm very happy being by myself, and I wouldn't describe that as being lonely at all, because I know, you know, if I want to speak to someone, I can pick up the phone or whatsoever. I've got friends, like, and those friends won't disappear just because I'm going around the world for a year. I'll still be there, and you meet such an amazing amount of people along the way. Some people you stay friends with for the rest of your life. Other people you'll just meet for a moment and you savor the moment, and then, you know, and then they'll be gone again, and you'll possibly never see them in your life again. So yeah, it's just it was an incredible experience overall.
Shall we get a little cut to?
I'm really interested to hear about your mental endurance throughout that trip. Like, you've said, you know, there were multiple times where you were going to throw in the towel, but like, what was that thing that just kept you going for as long as you did as well? Like a year cycling, which is a long time.
I guess there's kind of various stages of a trip like this. So I think when you leave, so the first month or so, there's a certain amount of novelty to it, as there is with loads of other things in life. You know, I think so. It's the novelty at the beginning that and I was also. I mean, I was naturally curious about the fact whether or not it could be done to cycle a one-speed bike around the world. Like, I hadn't heard of anyone who's done that. So I think in a certain sense that was kind of the overarching thing throughout the trip, where you kind of, it wasn't to prove anything. I was just simply out of curiosity, is this possible or isn't it possible?
I've had a couple of conversations this week in the lead up to you joining us on Cut 2. Why wouldn't you, as a cyclist, why wouldn't you choose a single speed?
I think it's like, yeah, you know, it's, but this is I think there's a whole thing where our society is heading. So I think, and I'm not technophobe at all. Like, I really like, you know, I think there's innovations that have been utterly useful. But there's also, especially in the bike industry, there's a lot of stuff that gets invented just to keep people entertained and to provide them with yet another thing. You know, what I like in general about cycling is the simplicity, and also that it is a cheap thing to do overall. And that basically also means that if you go to countries like Iran or Laos, Vietnam, so countries which, you know, where people have a different living standard, they still ride a bicycle and it's still the same thing. You know, it's got two wheels, it's got a frame, it's got some sort of handlebars, a chain, and that's it, you know, and it will go.
Don't forget a seat.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's true. So I think it's the simplicity is, and I didn't do any single speed riding until 2010 when I made the, well, for other people, mad decision. For me it was, yeah, totally normal to cycle home for Christmas in the middle of winter, and pretty tough conditions, minus 10 degrees, so this is where things start freezing on your bike. And I thought, like, I'm not gonna bog myself down with having a bike where things could go wrong. I'm just gonna take one which is as simple as possible, and it was the right decision because things didn't break. And, you know, ever since I did do that, there was no real rational argument not to take a single speed bike. And I think simplicity is a really thing, and that approach is to everything. You can make things overly complicated. You can take that across all walks of life, or you can deal things in kind of saying, look, let's make it simple. Let's make it a way that everybody understands it. If you make things complicated for the sake of then not doing it, that's tricky. You know, I'm also not saying that you should do everything in the simplest way possible. I think there needs to be an element of challenge in there as well. But there's certain processes that don't need to be more complicated than possible. And certainly riding a bike is one of them.
Not only are you a cyclist, but you are also a content creator and an influencer. You have a huge following in the cycling community, and a large part of that is just because you've documented your journey around the world and everything else that you've been doing on the side. So I guess when did you start using both of these elements? When did you start combining content creation with your cycling?
I think kind of in a way before my trip around the world, because I was always interested in medium. And when I worked with Finn, so when we met, I was head of marketing at Scottish Swimming. And I started there in 2012. And, you know, one of the first things I was trying to introduce was live streaming at events. Because we were always talking about, oh, you know, we've got those families all across Scotland. They're sometimes in weird and wonderful, like, not weird and wonderful, but far away from where the action happens. In Shetland and Orkney, you know, some of the parents were on oil rigs in the North Sea, so they could not just simply travel to see their kids' competition. And that's, I think this is where I realized how much power film video has as a medium, you know, to to connect people and to tell your story. But then, you know, I was also like, I had a full-time job and I was doing a lot of cycling, and back in the days, equipment was nowhere nearly as compact as it is these days. So I really started filming using my iPhone very much when I went around the world, basically to create a vlog. And that was proper, you know, YouTube style. Like, you know, it was, you know, if I look at the films right now, I haven't watched them for a while, it's a very different style, it's a very different production quality than I would do these days. But then in a way, it was again, you have to start somewhere, and there was obviously a great trip to do that. I think after the round the world trip, there was I was kind of like naturally kind of looking at how can I combine my passion with cycling with making a living. I was basically using my around the world trip, and having worked in marketing and being a DJ for a long time, so music's a really important element in what I'm doing, combining the three things together, and it started from there. I did some stuff in 2017, so I worked with Finn and you actually on the River Raid, and then I did a few films myself. And I think the thing that really kicked it off again was doing No Stone Unturned, which was a self-filmed documentary about cycling the Silk Road in Kyrgyzstan. And that was the first film that really got an audience out there. And it was solely filmed on an iPhone. So no drones, you know. I had an Osmo Pocket with me as well, but managed to fall into a river on day one, and that rendered that useless.
Yeah, it's too complicated a piece of equipment, you know.
Yeah, there was such a stupid accident. No, it wasn't an accident. I was just falling in a freshwater river, but I had all my electronics in the pockets. But this is like, you learn, you know. There's stuff. This is just, you know, you make experiences. And you know, once you've made them, you try not to do them again. And I think that's. But then again, that comes back to cycling. And that question you asked, you know, how do you deal with pressure, and why don't you throw the towel in? It's a question of experience. Because the more experience you have, the more situations you can reference to your own personal experience. So if you start from a very, you know, at the beginning you start off and you're possibly very much heavily influenced by other people's experiences. And the more you progress, you know, I've been sitting on my bike now for 15 years doing what I'm doing. And I did a fair share of filmmaking in that time as well. So I can now reference situations back to my own experience, and I think this is much more powerful. And there are many moments where you kind of go like, right, I've done it at some stage in my life. I pushed my bike over a boogie path and it was fine. I arrived at the end. There's no need to stress about this. It's the same with filmmaking, you know. I think when I started, I remember when I did the film in Kyrgyzstan, you know, I was commissioned to do a film, and I was just like, what happens if I screw this up? You know, what am I gonna do? And then I thought, like, you know, those people said they want the documentary from you because they, you know, for whatever shape or form, they believe in what you're doing, and so just go out there and do it, and, you know, try to do a good job. And eventually, yeah, it came together pretty well in the end.
In terms of footwear, are you always, what are the proper cycling, you know, the ones that clip in, what are they called?
Well, cycling shoes.
Cycling shoes. I didn't want to assume. Are you always wearing those as you're doing these long, you know, in Kyrgyzstan, for example?
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Except if I ride in snow, because then they can be a pain in the neck.
So can I paint a picture for everyone that watches your content? Every time you see a shot of Markus cycling into the distance, you're needing to either cycle or run back, collect
Yeah.
that camera,
Exactly.
and then go back. So literally, you might be traveling around the world or across the country, but you're actually doing multiple multiple laps. It's an incredible feat.
Yeah, it's it can be, and it gets really interesting. So if I'm documenting a route, for example, so the process is basically there's you start from scratch in most of the cases. You do some desk research and then you plot something on the computer, and then you'll have that GPX file with the route, and you put it on your GPS on the bike. In most cases, test riding those routes, and then often the filmmaking is part of that process. So in an ideal world, you just test ride it, and then you have this clean file, and then you can work with it. Like if you're doing the filming at the same time, you won't have that because you're going back and forth. So you have to then go back into the file and clean the whole file up as well, because you obviously don't want to tell people, no, you don't have to cycle 5 times this speed. I remember there's one shot in the Kyrgyzstan film, 5 seconds of film, and it took 45 minutes to record that because I didn't have a drone. So the reason why I didn't take a drone to Kyrgyzstan because it was just too much to log around, and I wouldn't have had any power in the mountains to recharge it. So I would have possibly had 2, 3, 4 battery loads, and then you'll just holy shit, what happened here? Oh dear, I think I screwed that bit up.
That's all right. What's the deal?
Is there maybe a recording limit on the A7S3?
That's the other thing. You record so much stuff that you don't need in the end. This is it's something to be mindful of. That the sheer quantity of footage. There's always a little bit of imperfection in there as well, because you obviously if you shoot other people, you can frame things much better. There's always an element of surprise when you do it this way, and often some things turn out to be actually much better than you imagined them to be, and sometimes you just bin it.
We should probably move on because there's lots of interesting stuff to come. Should we have a little cut to Markus? Oh, fill up your drink first. Let's prioritize.
Cut to
your first cycling adventure that you were filming, that you got paid for, or at least brought in some revenue from. Tell us about that. How did it come about? How did you make it happen?
I think the first proper paid job was with the Scottish Youth Hostels Association, actually. I guess with all people who start out at the beginning, it's really tough to do that, because I think you got no idea really what day rates are, because that's about in the end of the day, I'm running a business, and running a business comes with loads of exciting stuff, but it also comes with a lot of costs and time. I think time is the most important thing, which if you start on that journey, you can't really calculate that properly because you've got no experience how long it takes to do your books and to acquire stuff. So I wonder how that came about. Actually, it was basically, I think I was talking to the marketing manager of the Scottish Youth Hostels Association, and they wanted to have a route that combined 4 hostels in the west of Scotland together: Port Charlotte, Oban, what else? Tobermory, and another one.
Gosh, well remembered to remember 3 after all that time.
I think the important bit is possibly to know as well. So when I was coming back from the round the world trip, so I was working not 9 to 5, but I had a proper, what people call a proper job. So I was paid a salary, but on the flip side, I also wasn't allowed to take any freelance work with that salary. So I couldn't have made what I'm doing right now work at all. And that was partly one of the reasons possibly why I left as well, because I kind of saw that a little bit as a infringement of my own freedom, I was kind of I'm okay getting paid, and I always worked more than I was contracted for anyway. But when I came back from the round the world trip, I basically had a choice. It's are you going to go back to the same old, or are you trying to set something else up yourself? which is going to be scary, and it's going to be a lot of unknowns in there. But financially, I had a little bit of a back still. So, I had basically given myself a budget for 12 months of cycling, plus another 5 months afterwards, where I could figure out what I want to do. And I think there's a really good decision, because I wasn't plunging into having to accept just any job when I came back from the round the world trip, because it takes a lot of time to kind of reconnect back to the real world. And then and then I did the thing of flipping back to same old happens, very, very human thing. We do that so many times. I found myself in job interviews for full-time positions, and I was like, hold on, Markus, this is not what you want to do. This is not you, do something else. Don't be scared by it. You've just cycled around the world. Like, this is a thing that most people don't achieve in their life. So, there's no point in being scared about something. So I then kind of got a part-time contract working for the Borders Book Festival. So I knew I could pay my rent for the month. And everything else was basically a bonus in my head. And then I was looking for paid work, doing what I really wanted to do. And there was it was called SYJ back then. It's called Hosting Scotland these days. And I think we're talking about confidence, and we're talking about things. So I think and I'm pretty sure you guys agree with that, you really have to believe in what you're doing, because otherwise you'll be dropping off with that, and financially it's going to be tricky sometimes, especially of finding your day rate and understanding how much your work is worth, because in the end of the day, that's what it's about. That takes a while. That doesn't happen overnight, but within all of that, you need to have the confidence of what you're doing is actually the right thing. Because if you don't have that confidence, that comes across to clients as well. When we filmed the Viva 8, there was the first project where I said, I'm going to design a route in the Scottish borders, document that with a film, and see if that model works. And that model worked. I had the confidence of doing it. The film has been watched, I don't know, I'm not sure, I haven't had a look at YouTube, but enough times to make it work. And there was some nice media coverage on the back of that as well. And that's exactly what I had planned to do with it. And then it's just a matter of, once you've done it successfully once, then look at the stuff that worked and the stuff that didn't work, make the stuff that didn't work better for the next project, and the stuff that worked also make it better, because it can always be better. And then do it again. And I think this is kind of the thing. And I mean, the whole thing I'm doing is based on, in many cases, knowing the right people and approaching them at the right time. That's, I think if you sum up business, that's kind of what it is. And I think this is a craft you learn with experience.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell you how to do that. And I think what I did with Bikepacking Scotland was very brave. For me, and I've done some brave stuff. I remember when I started, so I wanted to do this, and after the River race, I really thought there's a niche for this. It is always going to be a niche thing. And what I'm doing is niche, and I'm actually quite proud doing something that is niche, because it's actually much more difficult to do that, but at the same time also much more rewarding. And I remember I went to various organizations beforehand, and they were all like, oh, bikepacking, nice. Good luck. Yeah, this is the kind of thing. And look at bikepacking now. Look at gravel riding. There's a huge market out there. And I sound like a marketeer, I sound like a business person. I'm actually not. I'm doing a lot of the stuff literally because I want to have people having a good time. And I think if I look at my round the world trip, that gave me so much in terms of my life experience. I learned so much in that year. And I think generally people who ride bikes, I'm yet to meet any miserable person who is riding a bike. Like most of the people I've met were really nice people, or they became really nice people while they were doing it.
Good therapy session.
In a way it is, like, you know, I've just seen, there's a film about the Capital Trail, from two women riding the Capital Trail and trying to do it under 24 hours. And that was the first proper trail I developed before I went around the world, on the back of my own time, you know, not as a commercial thing at all. And that's just so nice to see that something is getting used by someone. And it's the same with the films as well. You know, I'm kind of on the thing is like, you know, if there's one or two people in the audience who watch that film and kind of say like, I'm going to do this, and it makes me feel better about myself, it changes something in my life, that's amazing. You know, that's in the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And of course, I have to run a business. I have to make it work. You know, I need to pay my bills. I need to pay myself. And it's also, I think this is the component that comes in once you're through this entrepreneurial phase, where you also kind of go like, well, I can't go full guns blazing all the time. I really need to take good care of myself, because especially good creative work requires that you take a breath every now and then and take a step back and kind of go like, whoa, you know, like now's the time to take some time off. And that's the thing, you know, that comes with time. But yeah, I kind of like, you know, I'm in that phase now where I'm kind of go like, you know, I'm thankfully like at a phase where I can kind of say like, I really want to do this work because I want to do it. Like I don't have to do it necessarily. And that's a nice place to be, you know, and it took 5 years to get there. And at times also in the 5 years, I had times where I was kind of go like, oh my gosh, you know, what if I'm not going to get any projects the next year? And then you kind of go like, there's nothing to think that way because you've done work, you know, and people liked it. So there's nothing to suggest that you won't be doing that in the future. So, yeah. But yeah, the economics of it is interesting sometimes.
The trials and tribulations of running your own business, as many can relate.
Yeah. Let me ask you one final question about earning before we move on. What one piece of advice would you give to someone out there who has a real passion for something that they would love to do full time and wants to earn a living from it? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, the first thing essentially is do it. You know, because I think this is what's holding back a lot of people. They like, I guess if you try something, you've got no experience whether it's going to work or not. You know, if you have a bit of fallback line, then possibly use that if you can. You know, that could be either savings or, you know, whatever. But if that's not the case, then I would also, that would not be the thing that would hold me back, because I think you can always in a way go back to what you used to do. Like, you know, don't burn bridges. I think that's possibly the biggest bit of advice. Like, you know, be mindful of what you want to achieve, but also be mindful of there's other people. You know, success is not just what you do. Like it's how you do it and how you make it, you know, how do you, because you can only achieve so much by yourself. You'll at some stage in the process you need a team. At some stage in the process you need to upscale it. And that always involves people, and people remember. So you know, kind of just be a nice person. And I think for me, and this is kind of also, that's coming back to setting the right price and whatever. Think about value. You know, don't think about like, cut the term money or any of this like out of your vocabulary. Whenever I talk to people, I talk about, you know, there is a certain value that I bring to what you're doing, and there's a certain value that you bring to what I'm doing. And that's what we're talking about. And there is an exchange of value going on. And that exchange will be either monetary or whatever, you know. But like, I think like, just be really mindful of who you are and what you want to do, and the value comes from that. And if you've got that sorted as the first step, and I think the things will fall in place afterwards.
Well said.
Markus, let's drink to that. That is a
great advice.
Cracking bit of advice.
Cheers.
Slàinte mhath. And I think that's a cut to moment, shall we? Cut to.
Cut to.
Okay, did we want to stop and start? Just check the camera's recording.
Oh, holy shit, what happened here? Oh, fuck.
Interesting, this next section. We've actually dived into a little bit, which is about living, day-to-day living as someone who is trying to make their craft work day-to-day. And you've spoken a bit about living, but this work-life balance is an interesting one for you, because indeed your work is very much a passion. Talk to us about, the work-life balance question. How do you make that work yourself?
That is a good question. I think I'm in the process of trying to master that and haven't quite reached it. So I think one thing that had a huge impact on managing that properly was getting a proper desk space. And I think that made a huge difference, because that basically, it's got the social componentry. Because I'm this, like, as I said, I can be quite introvert, but I also need social contact every now and then. So it's a co-working space, there's other people there, other photographers, videographers, all sorts of people. It's great if you want a bit of piece of advice from someone, you'll find someone who can give you some advice. I think the interesting thing about what I'm doing is that, cycling is for me a hobby and a job at the same time. There are times where I'm quite strict with myself and kind of but really need to force myself to get off the desk and say that's it, you've worked X amount of hours today. That's it. And then I also sometimes deliberately go on cycle rides where I don't take my camera with me or my GPS or whatsoever, and just bumble around town and have a good time. And this is neither route mapping nor any content creation whatsoever. But yeah, the lines are very blurry. But then on the other side, I think I've learned to accept that as well. I'm not a sort of person who necessarily switches off on a Friday afternoon and then goes off to do the weekend and then comes back to the Monday, because I've tried that a number of times as well, and then you see an amazing sunset or whatsoever and you kind of go no one really stops me from getting my camera out, and if the situation is okay to do it, then all of a sudden then that becomes work for 5 minutes.
Gosh, I feel you.
Yeah, big time.
I think in a sense that's a luxury I really have. I managed to do something that I really love doing, that I'm passionate about, which inspires other people, and I earn a living with it. It's a pretty privileged position to be in.
Markus, you're an absolute bastard.
I know, it's but it's on the other hand, this is good, because every job I do evaluate that always, am I delivering what I was supposed to do here? Am I giving my client, a brand, a DMO or whoever, the best possible outcome they can achieve? That's what it is about, and also, but then also flipping that around into personal life. So if I'm out with my girlfriend or with friends whatsoever, then you kind of go am I giving those people the best possible time they can spend with me? And I'm not giving them the best possible time if I'm constantly looking at my phone, checking my messages, or spending, sometimes if I'm out on a social ride, I just have to accept the fact that some people have a totally different approach to what I'm doing. So they won't be stopping at every single opportunity to take a picture or to capture something. And that's cool. This is kind of I think this is finding the right balance of kind of understanding where is this kind of thing, where do I need to draw the line, and if I draw the line, then just stick to it.
You've travelled all around the world. What was the worst experience in your cycling and also content creation career?
Oh dear, I'm just wrangling my brain.
Yeah, take a moment. Like, let's pick the best one. Let's pick the best one.
Are there that many? Yeah, the best, worst one.
Oh, let's start with the best one. What was the best one? That is a tricky one because you don't want to upset anyone.
Let's say one of the best, and then let's quickly get to the worst.
That's the part where everyone's watching. Oh, am I gonna get picked here? From a creative point of view, it was GB Duo last year. Like, I really enjoyed that as an experience, as an overall experience, and also just a sheer concept.
GB Duo in 3 words. Hard as.
If I could capture in a sentence, like, the way I felt about it on the finish is, I left it all out there. I couldn't have gone back and ridden harder at any stage. I left it all out there. And I think if you can get to the end of any race and say that, whether you come in first, middle or last, that's awesome. You know, that's your personal best. That's you building a sense of worth.
I filmed GB Duo and it was completely done by bike and public transport while following a pretty fast-paced bikepacking race on a route I partially knew but partially didn't know at all. So a bad experience of the good experience was actually sitting on the train on the first day after having missed. So I was documenting Mark Beaumont's journey, but also the other riders in the field as well. And on day 1, I've missed Mark a number of times by like 5 minutes, and that's super like annoying because like if it's 10 or 20 minutes, you know, at least you've totally screwed up your schedule. 5 minutes is kind of exactly that time frame where you haven't quite screwed it up, but still haven't got any results. So basically I spent the whole day cycling around and taking various trains with getting very little footage. I mean, the amount of footage I've used in the overall documentary is minimal from day 1 because it just wasn't the right stuff, you know, and it was like, it was very annoying, but on the other hand, like at the end, it was such an amazing experience because it was something that hadn't, like, to my knowledge, that hadn't been done beforehand, and it was in a sense it was a bit like the round the world trip. It was a bit bonkers, and it was kind of like, so people were like, so why are you not just driving around and follow people that way like everyone else would do? And I was like, because I generally believe in that wasn't the right approach to document the race, and in the end of the day, the approach I took delivered what I wanted to do as a film, and that's all that matters. Without, basically, with the lowest carbon footprint you can possibly imagine doing a job like this. There'll always be a sort of carbon footprint in what you do.
The only thing that's less carbon footprint that I can think is maybe rambling.
Yeah.
Naked, that is.
That's true, yeah. Well, you still have a carbon footprint because you'll eat food which is possibly, you know, you would have to be a vegan rambler who is basically producing all your own produce.
Let's get them on Cut 2. Let's find that person.
Next week on Cut 2.
It's Cut 2!
It's
Cut 2.
Nice one, Marcus.
For the 10th time, you have travelled around the world. That is quite an amazing feat and has no doubt changed your outlook on life. It's changed your outlook on working when you got home. You know, obviously you had a bit of buffer, but it made you think, you know, this isn't for me. I want to work for myself, which is another huge achievement. But if you were to go back in time and give yourself some advice, what advice would that be?
It's a good question. I think being a little bit more mindful about what you're doing, what your actions have on other people, because I think this is possibly a thing I'm considering now, but I haven't really considered that, you know, as the younger self. You know, I was possibly quite forceful and like, you know, I've I've always, in a sense, of carved my own path in life the way I thought it works best for me. Like if I would have to go back 20 years and kind of start again, possibly I think the bit of advice I would possibly give myself is just to kind of could have potentially started that self-employed journey much earlier. You know, I think there was possibly but then I've traveled a lot, and I guess like when I moved to certain countries, having like the jobs I did, they gave me a social network, and they gave me kind of like this network of people you kind of really need to start up. So in a sense, it made total sense to do it this way. Like I've always managed to hopefully find at least the point where I said like, this is it, this is a new chapter. And yeah, but yeah, bit more mindful, bit less forceful at times.
Great advice, Markus. Really, really good advice. Interestingly, to give a comparison, I often reflect the opposite, which is maybe I should have found a company that I was like, oh, shit, that's an awesome company. I love what they're doing. I'm going to get a job there and learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and then do that. Whereas I did that, and I tell you what, I learnt loads. Like, you know, similar to yourself, I'm a jack of all trades, master of some, as I like to call it. So maybe it's just reflecting as we get older, we're like, I should have maybe done it that other way. When I met you, I thought, here's a guy who respects and understands content. That's what I loved the most about working with you, because I got that vibe. I was like, you understand it, you respect it, you're happy to work with someone who's just really passionate about creating that, and that really made a difference. And that really makes a difference to us day to day, working with people who have that similar respect for content, because not everyone does. Everyone kind of needs content these days, but not everyone understands the background of it. And you've just constantly doubled down on understanding the background of content to the point of becoming like a really interesting and fascinating content creator. And I encourage people to look and sit and watch, like put Markus's films on full screen, turn the volume up, and just sit, and you'll feel like you're on that wee journey with you. And that's what I like about.
You know, it's like, and this is my big advantage, you know, like if you work in the creative industries, like always appreciate that there's a lot of work that goes into those things. So often what you see at the end is just a fraction of, you know, the whole process. And that's important as well. But it's also the same, you know, I think that is the same with everything else. You know, you'll find some amazing carpenters, some amazing bricklayers, you know, everyone who's got a passion in what they're doing and like is really, really, kind of involved and kind of, I think that's what's important for me. And I think this is also makes a difference when you work with people. So I always work really well with people who are passionate about things, who I know, like, and you know, it's also, it's about the thing is like the way you work. So, you know, put trust in people. You know, it takes a few moments, days, years to build a relationship with people. But once you've got that relationship, trust that relationship. Because otherwise,
well said.
Like that's kind of like, you know, why it's just, I think this is possibly that's a bit of advice I would give to my younger self as well, because I think there were potentially moments at the very early stages of my career where I didn't have this trust in other people that much as I do right now. And there's just a rabbit hole you put yourself into, because like, yeah, like, you know, empower people to do something, and then let them roll with it, and believe in that what they're doing is going to be the best possible outcome.
Nice. I loved that you mentioned the trades there, as we call them, because when we were renovating this place, there's one tradesperson.
I was just thinking about that as well, just based off what you've said.
Every time, yeah, exactly. I've mentioned it to everyone. Every time I walk into the bathroom, I look at the tiles and I think of Scott. Because Scott was so passionate about his work and the tiles and was explaining the detail of them, because I'm interested in people who are interested about something. I have really, before that time, had no interest in tiles, but he made me interested in tiles, and he was so passionate about tiles. I've recommended him to everyone, and if I ever need tiling done, I know who to call. So Scott, if you're watching / listening, you're an absolute goddamn legend. Absolute legend. But I'm going to move it swiftly on. We met when social media existed. We both remember when social media didn't exist. What is your thoughts on technology in terms of cycling and content creation with this rapid advance?
Well, I think in terms of technology, it's like everything's like, it basically enabled me to do the things I can do right now. Like, I think 10 years back, it would have been quite difficult. So most of the projects, and this is my huge advance, like I can literally take all the camera equipment with me on the bike and cycle around for 80 kilometers. So it's a rolling production studio. Like, and
Nice.
it does come with compromises as well, you know, like, but I think on the larger scale of things, I can produce high quality content with very lightweight equipment. Like I think the thing that technology will never replace is having a good creative direction, like
Storytelling.
you know, having storytelling, having an eye for what, because I think that's the craft. Like cameras, like any camera equipment you get these days, if you know how to use it, it will produce super good quality. Like, it's really difficult to screw it up. But you can, with the best camera in the world, if your composition isn't right, if your lighting isn't right, then it's, you know, that's the thing that technology can never replace. When I was working as a DJ, like, I'm pretty sure you get all sorts of bits. Like, I haven't DJed for 12 years now, so I'm kind of like in the dark ages of vinyl. The thing you can't replace, and you will never be able to replace, is which song fits in which situation. And this is about reading the room, and this it's about making a good film. You know, you kind of really have to think what works best on screen, and that is not necessarily what looks best in real world. You know, this is the kind of thing. I think my take on technology in cycling is a slightly different one. Because I do think there's some technologies in cycling. Like, I'm a big fan of e-bikes, for example, for the sake of getting more people into cycling, and I think it's an absolute godsend to people who, you know, who like couldn't make it up a hill beforehand, who just simply didn't have the strength or whatever, and they can now sit on an e-bike and cycle up a hill, and that's amazing. But I think the cycling industry has also demonstrated that sometimes there were things invented just for the sake of inventing something, and no one really needed it.
Yeah, it's a gadget, right?
Like, and so the whole gadgety thing, like, that's like, I think, and again, I'm quite careful mincing my words right now, because I do know people who sit on their bike because they can record their ride on Strava, or they can sit on a turbo trainer and ride on Swift. None of that remotely interests me at all. I must say, like, I've spent a bit of time on a turbo trainer, and I thought it's the most boring thing I could do in the world. Like, literally, no.
Is that similar to a Peloton type?
Pretty much, yeah. And like, for training purposes, I should do it much more often, because you'll just, like, if you look at the time spent on it and what you get out of it, it's brilliant, you know. like I think I had the most enjoyable rides on my 1970s single speed with skinny tires on the most unsuitable terrain for this bike. You know, like times where you get shit scared going down a hill because you've got wind brakes that don't really brake. And you kind of go like, holy, oh dear, you know, something's gonna happen here, but it doesn't happen because you also kind of got this, kind of reassurance, you know, I've cycled to many places and I can pull this off. Quiet confidence is what Mark calls it, a good friend of mine, and I think this is a good thing. So, you know, technology and camera thing, amazing, but you still need to use. You still need to know how to use them. Like a film doesn't produce itself just because you've got a great camera. You know.
Marcus, thanks for saying that. I deliver a lot of training to people who aren't content creators but handle content. And that's what I say all the time. I'm like, I'm going to teach you the craft, and then you can pick up any piece of equipment you want. Editing is the same. You know, it doesn't matter what you're editing on. It's the craft of editing. Once you understand how pieces fall together, well, they don't fall together, but you know what I mean? Yeah. You can use whatever you want. But that development doesn't happen in a day. No. You can learn the basics of the craft, but it takes, and I think you're evidence of that, it takes time, effort, determination, and just a willingness to get to the finish line. Oh yeah. But you're pushing that finish line on every single time, which is why I love your work so much, is that, you know, you compartmentalize these routes and this content, but I'm always waiting. Well, where's he gonna go to next? Where's he gonna cycle to? Yeah,
I'm gonna be taking a totally unsuited bike on a long distance journey tomorrow. See what the outcome's gonna be. But
we'll keep updated. Yeah. Before we let you go, is there anything that you would like to mention that is coming out soon that people should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I think two projects which are, you know, pretty close to my heart. That sounds super cliche. I think I've spent about the best part of 5 years wrangling with myself whether to write a book or not. About my round the world trip, and I don't think I still have come to any conclusion, because I still think there's a lot of material in there which should possibly be make it into a book. But I've worked on a book and documentary combination, and again, this is possibly a little bit pushing the lines, because I love printed publishing. There's nothing cooler than having like a nice book in your hands. But I also love film, so what I've done is portray 25 different people. So, because I really believe in that people do not identify themselves with things. People identify themselves with real people. And this is another bit of, in terms of content creation, like if you look at brands, you know, no one likes a brand just because of a brand. That's rubbish. They like a brand because of the people associated with the brand, you know, the people that represent the brand. And that was basically like a simple marketing concept I've taken into the book as well, because I was like, I can do 25 routes in Britain. And that in itself will be a really nice process, because I get to travel the country, and, you know, but then I thought like it will be much richer to do the process of actually, I'm going to find 25 people I think are interesting and that could be interesting for other people as well, and portray them and portray their favorite routes. And that was basically what the documentary and the book is going to be about. And I think, that was a really nice thing. And then I'm also working on a film at the moment. I got commissioned by Valde Barragal and Carl McFerries to do a bikepacking journey across the Inner Hebrides, and I think there's places in life that you aspire to go to, but for whatever reason, it never happened. So there's 2 places in Scotland. One is the Mull of Kintyre, which I'm yet to reach, and the other one was the Isle of Jura. And Jura is, I think so I eventually made it there. So that's the documentary I'm working on at the moment. It was a mind-blowing experience because Jura is such a unique place, and I think Jura kind of like sums up a little bit of my life in an island. So there's Jura is a place where the KLF burned £1 million overnight in a boat shed, and the KLF is the band that influenced my music performances when I was a DJ. Like, I don't think there's another band that had such a massive impact on my, and so my brother used to work as a DJ in East Germany, and being a DJ in East Germany was literally recording stuff from the radio station illegally.
So this is pre the wall coming down. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And then in the 90s, so and all of this is like sadly really topical at the moment again, I think, which was going on in the world at the moment, I think. But I remember, so when the wall came down, the first thing he bought was a CD player, and he bought the White Room from the KLF, which is, I think it's available again, but basically the KLF produced a record, made a lot of money. So talking about passion and believing in what you're doing, I think the KLF is the best real life example you can ever find. They wrote a book, How to Record a #1 single. They did it. Became insanely successful. And then I thought, like, hold on, we don't need all of this cash. And burned it in the boat shed in Jura. Again, in itself, quite questionable. You could have possibly been...
I've never heard that.
Neither have I. That's crazy.
After it had been done, and about a year or so later, there was we had this film. We actually had filmed the whole thing, all however long it took. And we started showing that film at places, and we felt we owed it to, at least to our families, to come up with a reason why you do something like that. And when we showed the film, when we went out with it, all people wanted to know was, did you really do it? You know, well, it could be fake, or this, you know, come with all these things. And we realised it didn't matter how much we said or attempted to prove that this is for real. This is the ones that didn't want to believe would not believe, and the ones that wanted to believe would want to believe.
So that happened in 1994, and then Jura is also the island where Orwell wrote 1984, and a book which has
Marcus, my gosh, you are full of gems.
They've got an amazing whiskey distillery as well. So
that's more how I know Jura.
I know. And
exactly.
There have always been so many good reasons to go to Jura, but for whatever reason, like, you know, I never really made it there. And then I got commissioned for this film project, and I was like, whoa, awesome, this is amazing. I finally get to go to Jura.
Marcus, what a perfect way to end the episode.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on and providing your time. It's really been awesome. Interestingly, the Riva Raid was one of the early projects that Martin and I collaborated on.
Oh yeah.
And came about because of you. So this is a nice little full circle over a decade on.
I still remember that drone incident.
Let's not talk about that.
When the drone was flying into the bit of woodland.
A brand new drone.
We totally thought that drone was lost. For sure. We found it though.
Dangling an inch above the water by a tree branch. Dangling. Whew.
Well, Marcus, enjoy the rest of your evening. I know you've got a bit more work to get on with. Safe travels back to Scotland.
Yeah.
All the best.
See you in Scotland soon.
Take care, Marcus.
Bye. See you later, mate.
Bye. What a legend, man. What a legend. Like, and such an insight into, you know, a life that not many people can say they've matched. Like, that guy is just full of experience, and a lot of amazing stories as well, and great advice. There was so many great gems in there for creatives, just people in general, about new outlook, about how to look at life in general. Yeah, super inspiring.
I would like to make a point though, Martin, because I'm pretty sure this episode has been plagued with more technical issues than any other episode, and I'm pretty sure my camera stopped recording during Marcus's last bit there.
So we're on the meat.
I'm on meat. You'll be on full quality, but I just want people to realize that I'm still recording the audio separately.
And the difference that audio makes compared to vision, and how important quality audio is
over quality video. And there'll be a bit in the middle there where we'll have poor quality audio and video. It'll be interesting how this episode comes together. Shit happens, and it's just how you can salvage it sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm totally pumped.
I'll be unlocking the old bike lock and back on the two wheels once again.
This is a great opportunity, I think, Martin, to remind people that this podcast, video podcast, however you're watching it, it's not sponsored by absolutely anyone. It's a passion project produced in-house at Faux Show Studios. So if you have enjoyed this and you are listening or watching to this point, then you know what to do. You know, it's all down there. Just follow along, and you know, the best thing you could do is just share it with someone that you think would enjoy this. And if you think someone would be great in terms of guest, get in touch. You know, send them our deets and be like, oh, you should totally go on this podcast. You like a drink. You don't need to drink alcohol. It can be a green tea. I mean, if you fancy it. That's what I'm obviously drinking. I just decant it in